The opening scene is the morning program. Basically, it's just the before the track walk. So this was the track in 1991. You can see that they had streamers for banners that lined the track, and hay bales. Look at that over-under too. I mean, you don't see over-unders at a local arena cross or fair race these days. And this is one of the first 125 qualifiers. There's Andy Atkins, number 2, rest in peace. Kip Sandell, number 1 on the Vickery Yamaha. So you can see there, if you've ever been to Greeley, that section right there is all filled in. It's all, the whole stands run all the way across the end of the stadium now, where back then there was just a north and a south stands, and the north stands was the side with the pits, and the south stands was the side with most of the spectators. And you'll see here as I pan back at a few of these races that there's a pretty good crowd back in the day. I mean, this was a college town, and so a lot of the college kids would come out and watch these races, and it just doesn't seem like be that way anymore. But look at this, Sean Morgan, number 927. He's 14 years old here. There's Andy Atkins, Sandell in 3rd. He was big for that 125 too. Look at that sand pit there. So yeah, there's Andy Atkins. Sean Morgan's leading this 250 qualifier, I believe it is. All local Colorado riders in this particular heat race. Team Green Vickery riders, 1st, 2nd, 3rd. And see there, you'll see on these starts here, the start was outside the stadium, and then it would come in, go around the finish line there, and then they would go outside the arena and then come back in. That was really cool. I don't know why they don't do that anymore. I don't know if it's insurance reasons or safety reasons, but they'd come back in the stadium and usually hit a big triple or a double right there, and the crowd would just go crazy. Yeah, Dennis Hawthorne leading Jared Carlson, and try to make out some of these riders. Again, I was 14 years old and I didn't really know too many of these riders. I knew Jeff DeMent. He was a national rider that was going to be pro in the next year or two, so I knew who he was. I want to say one of these guys on a Honda is Josh Kellogg, but I'm not positive. I thought that may have been him. That could be somebody else, I'm not sure. But Dennis Hawthorne leading. And this was back in the day when the dealerships would they would either call a rider up, or the rider would call them and say, hey man, I'm interested in coming and racing your race. And these dealerships would give these guys a bike for the evening to race. Like they would set the suspension up, all that. And like Dennis Hawthorne, and like he rode for 4 Seasons. That shop's not around anymore, but 4 Seasons was a shop that sponsored some riders, and they sponsored him. They basically said, hey, come on out, race our race. We'll give you some bikes to race for the night, and we got a big purse, all that stuff. So these guys would come out, him, Jeff DeMent, all these guys were given bikes from the local dealership, and then they would give them back, and then they would just sell them as a used unit back then. Mind you, these were when bikes were $2,500 out the door. Bikes being $10,000 now, nobody's getting free bikes anymore. So unless you're really killing it on the national circuit as a privateer, you're most likely paying for your bikes. And dealerships just don't do that anymore. The riders that do come into town to race our local races, they just bring their own bikes. But this was a cool era where the dealerships would hook you know, a promising rider from out of state, you know, kind of a name that would, you know, bring some people out to watch the race, and, and provide them with a bike to see if they could win for the night. So, yeah. And this brings back some memories. And look at this triple jump. That's a full 64-foot triple jump. Like, if you go to the local races here in Colorado anymore, you're not going to see 3 actual humps that make a triple jump. It's like you know, it's one jump and then it's kind of a camelback. You know, it gives you some room for error, which is nice for some of these younger kids. But you know, back in the day, you know, when Supercross was still in its infancy, people were trying to learn, you know, track builders were basically mimicking what they saw on TV. Like, you know, well, this is what's on TV, and so this is what we had to ride, and this is how we rode it. And, you know, the tracks have to be good for everybody, and so they have to level them out. Here's Robbie Rayner on a 125. This kid, this is like Hayden Deegan showing up to Colorado, and we're like, what is he doing here, right? I would read about this kid in the magazines, and I just heard so much about him. And then I go to the championships. This was like the second Supercross race I'd ever been to, and he shows up, and I was like, what the heck, you know, like, this is crazy. But you can see he just absolutely smokes everybody. This is like his first couple rides on a 125. He would eventually get a contract from Kawasaki in the next, I think in 92, late 92, and in 93. And man, shoulders and knees were his problem. If he could have just stayed healthy. He rode like I thought he rode like an android. Like it was just something about his riding style that was just so fluid and loose, and he looked like a robot. He was just so awesome to watch. You'll see him a little bit later here on an 80. Back when they were 80s, they're 85s now, but he just killed everybody in this. That Fox gear was cool too. The bones stuff from 91. I like the barbed wire stuff. My friend Zach had the barbed wire stuff. I thought that was so cool. The Fox stuff at this era was just on point, with the zebra stripes, the bones, the polka dots, all that cool stuff. And Raynard was a full Fox rider. It was really cool. It was like a superstar, you know, that was the same age as me showing up. I'm like, wow, this is really cool to see this kid. John Beavers was a really good announcer. Really cool dude. Really good guy. He's the one that's announcing these races, and he made the crowd get into it. The way he got, you know, he knew all these riders, and he knew little nuances that they did, and he brought that into the announcing and stuff. And it was really cool. Unfortunately, he passed away at a crash in 1999 in Cheyenne, I believe. And he was a good guy, man. Good announcer. There's Jim Hawley. I think this is the Open Pro. He only raced Open Pro and 250 Pro, I believe, because I don't ever remember him and Dennis Hawthorne going head to head. Maybe in the 250 and Open Pro mains later that night, which I did not get because the battery died in the camera that I was using, so I only get the first 125 main event. But these are the heat races. Jeremy Middaugh is leading, local guy. He was from Grand Junction. I think that's Josh Kellogg in second. I'm not sure. If somebody knows, you can comment on that, who that is right there on the Honda. Derek Brown, number 2, DB, 6-time Colorado State champion. Also rode for SE Racing, BMX Racing, back in the day when he was 10 years old, and had his own frame. They named a frame after him, his own bike and stuff. So Derek was a pretty prominent rider here in Colorado. You see Jim Hawley goes right by him. Jim was at the end of his career here, but still, you know, pretty quick. And a little chunky there. He was always a little kind of a big guy, but man, he's got the job done, you know. So here This is Sean Morgan getting the lead in one of the races, and I think Dennis Hawthorne somebody comes from behind and almost gets everybody here. I think it's Hawthorne. There's Hawthorne. He's behind Sandell. But Sean Morgan gets out front, takes off. 14 years old. And this is when the SRAC had the mark system, and you had to, once you won at a certain level, they were like, they kicked you out. You got so many marks, they called them. If you finished in the top, I think 2% of your class that day, you would get a mark. That's basically if you won or got second. So it was basically the top 2 that would get a mark. And, guys were turning pro at 13 and 14. My first year at this race was in 1990, and I was riding 80s. I was riding the mini novice class, and I had a Suzuki RM80. My hero was Denny Stevenson, because he won the 1990 Eastern Region Supercross Championship, and he was on a Suzuki. So we went to the Supercross Championships the year before this. I didn't have a camera at the time, but it was my first ever Supercross experience of any kind. And I went there, and I peeked over the fence, and there was Denny Stevenson practicing, and I was like, That's Stevenson. What is Stevenson doing here? Like, what the? Like, I was blown away that the 1990 Eastern Region champion was at our local podunk race, you know, and like, but he was from Nebraska, you know, just a few hours away, and came down because, you know, they promoted this race very well and made a lot of money back then. So it was cool to see your heroes show up to these races back in the day, you know, and battle our local guys. You can see right here, Jeremy Middall, he's a local rider, battling with Dennis Hawthorne and keeping him at bay the whole race. So, look at that. Those bikes just barked. They sounded good. It's awesome. There's Brown. There's Jeff DeMint. You can see that back there, the finish, like, you know, the scoring tower or the, you know, up there, that's completely changed right now. It's just nuts. All right, so this is the 80cc main event. You have Robbie Raynard right there in second. This is his very last race on an 80. His dad said that they were selling it or, you know, giving it back to Coway the next week, and he was just doing 125s. You got Micah Moyes running second, and in lead is Jeremy Heinrichs. So some of you might know Jace Heinrichs. His boy is probably one of the fastest riders in our state. Look forward to him turning pro pretty quick. But Robbie Raynard was on another level. You can see here, he got a bad start. I don't know if it was on purpose or what, but he was last coming into the first corner. And before this lap is over, he's in the lead. He just goes right by Heinrichs. And mind you, you know, our local riders were great, but this kid was just on another level, you know. Watch him just nail this corner right here. And just throttle control. Awesome. I mean, that was just a level of riding I'd never seen at that time, you know. Hearing about this kid in the magazines and then seeing him, you know, I'm surprised he didn't throw that 80 over all three of those, you know. A year later, all these local mini expert racers were throwing their 80s over the triple at the championships. Like, I don't know if Robbie Raynard coming here leveled everybody else's game up and said we gotta step it up or what, but the next year dudes were sending it. I remember Micah Moyes sending it over a triple with JP Lighton right behind him, and Micah Moyes' front wheel was blowing up and he was still sending it. Excuse me. He was still sending it. Oh no. Alright, here we go. That's me right there. That's me getting Jim Hollywood Holly's autograph. And if you notice my kit, I'm wearing a 1992 Axo gel print jersey, that Damon Bradshaw replica, and I have Jeff DeMint's signature right in the middle of it. This is Dennis Hawthorne. You can see he has the Four Seasons jersey on. Four Seasons was the one that provided him with the bikes for that night. I ended up walking away with that jersey later that night. He gave me that jersey, and I was like, oh, awesome, right? You know, I ended up wearing that jersey like the next year, racing the B class. I remember it was so huge on me, but I loved it. For some reason, I thought it looked good on me, and I loved it. So, something stupid. All right, so I think this is the 125 main event. Dennis Hawthorne with the lead. Yeah, 125 Pro main event. And so we got Hawthorne out front, and I believe Dennis, I believe that Jeff DeMint is in second. So I only get about maybe 3 or 4 laps of this main event, but look at the crowd that's still there. There's still, I think the next lap, I kind of pan back a little bit, and you can see it's 10 o'clock at night, and both sides of the stands are packed. People are there just, you know, like, it just doesn't seem like it's like that way anymore. you just don't get a crowd on the south end of the stands anymore. You get a handful of people. That's what I see, a handful of people there. And I don't know if it's the way that they're promoting it or what, but Ed and Matt that promoted this race back in the day did an excellent job, and they brought people out to this, man. You know, inflation and just things getting expensive, it's probably the reason why, you know, people just don't come out to events anymore. Motorcycles, football, baseball, whatever it may be, you know. But these were good times, man. When you would race at night under the lights with a crowd, and the crowd would get into it, you would feel that, you know. You would feed off that, and it would make you ride better. You know, I kind of go back to the arena cross we raced earlier this year with my son, and you know, I want him to experience racing in front of a crowd and racing with the lights. And the way the arena cross series has it going on, nobody shows up for that on Sunday. They want to see the pros. And then if you're racing on Sunday or Saturday or Sunday as an amateur, nobody's coming to watch you unless they're a friend of yours or their family members, you know. And so I was pretty disappointed to see that there was no crowd for these amateur races at the arena cross. Like, I really want kids to experience this type of racing, you know, like at night in the summertime, you know, with the crowd and everybody there. It really makes a big difference. So that's how it was back in the day, and I just figured I'd share that with you. So if you have any comments, please leave them below, and I appreciate you everybody watching. Thanks so much. Have a good night.